It's good to have you with us. It's NEA Report. I'm Stan Morris reporting tonight with you live, along with George Jarrett, my good friend and also colleague in the journalism world. Good to have you in with us tonight. We're here to talk tonight about a case that's been getting a lot of attention lately. In fact, it's been 14 years since the 22-year-old college student Rebekah Gould was murdered in the Ozark Hills near Melbourne. You may have heard more about this case recently because it's been featured on Dr. Oz, and a podcast series has also been developed around it called Hell and Gone. It's something that's going to be continuing to get a lot of attention because George has actually been working on this lately and found that there may be some new developments in the case. There may be some new stuff actually happening in this, and the possibility of leads after all this time. It's incredible to think about.
Yes. Kind of give your viewers a little bit of a taste of what this case is about. On September 20th, 2004, Rebekah Gould, a 22-year-old college student, was at 8 o'clock in the morning, she dropped a friend off, a guy named Casey McCullough, off at work. She had been dating McCullough, and then after she dropped him off at work, she returned to his house to collect her things. Right before she got to the house, she stopped at a convenience store. She got like a breakfast biscuits, stuff like, it's typical stuff you'd get at 8 o'clock in the morning in a convenience store. She goes back to his house, and from that point on, she vanished. Wow. And so the next day, she was supposed to pick her sister Danielle up, and they were going to go back to their apartment in Fayetteville. And she never arrived to pick her sister up, so the family reported her missing. Mm-hmm. I was a reporter at the time at a newspaper called Area-Wide Media News in Salem, based in Salem. And, kind of a typical thing that I would do is I would call around all the sheriff's department, police departments. We were a weekly newspaper, so, so Monday was kind of a big day. So the day she disappeared, I called the Ozark County Sheriff's Office, and they didn't say anything about it, which at that point they probably didn't know anything about it. So by Wednesday of that week, I was starting to get phone calls from people asking me, hey, have you heard about this missing girl down in Melbourne? And so I went down to Melbourne, and I went to the sheriff's department, and I encountered her mother, who handed me this missing poster. And on the back of the poster, the notes I took that day, I just started writing names down. I'm like, so how long has she been missing? What's the dynamic of her being in town if she's a college student up in Northwest Arkansas? Who's she friends with? Who's her boyfriend? And so that's kind of how the odyssey of the case started for me. I met her father, Dr. Larry Gould. He's a prominent dentist in Mountain Home. And I literally watched him pin one of those posters to a guide arrow around a corner near the little town called Guyan. Her friend Casey had lived in a town near the town of Guyan. And so a week passed, and there were still no clues as to where she was at. Well, then that Monday, I got to work really early in the morning. I was real nervous, just kind of. It was the first murder I'd ever covered. Yeah. So I, was pretty. I hate to use the word distraught. It was very distressing to me. So I went back. I went to Melbourne. I left Salem. I drove down to Melbourne. I went to the courthouse. And I think my plan at the time, if I remember correctly, I was going to go talk to the county judge or something. Just talk to some people in the courthouse, just see if they'd heard anything kind of off the record, like where are they searching, what are they doing. And I remember a couple ladies were walking around the courthouse. And I remember hearing a woman say they were out searching near some property that she owned or knew about or something to that effect. So I asked the lady, I said, well, where is this property at? And she told me it was down Highway 9, which is a thoroughfare that connects Melbourne to Mountain View. And so I drive down there. I vividly remember seeing vultures in the air, which is it's not uncommon in the Ozark foothills to see vultures. I mean, they're around all the time. But it was very ominous to me to see them in the sky very near where her body was found. And so I get out there, I see a line of cars lined up on the side of the road, trucks, and a lot of first responders, people like that. And I had encountered several people who were searching for her body, during this time. And I didn't really know their names. I recognized their faces, because I'd see them out in different spots. At work, right? Yeah, in different spots. And because I was out there every day with them, looking for and talking to family members and people. And so I saw a guy that I kind of recognized. I want to say that he was a first responder, volunteer fireman, something like that. And I asked him, I said, so are you guys out here looking for her? And he pointed not too far from where we were standing, and he said, she's right there. Oh. And I saw her. and I'll never forget it. It just, I mean, there are some moments in your life. I mean, like the way I kind of describe it, you know, when you see something like that, like it's kind of like you're in a tunnel.
Yeah.
You can't hear nobody, and you know, and just thinking about this poster, her family, and then seeing her right there. Was very that was very distressing to me, and I'll never forget. I had a camera, and somebody said, "You're not gonna take a picture of this, are you?" Because I had a habit when I get out, you know, newspaper guy, you know, you always grab your camera, put it on your side, and walk out.
Of course.
And I said, I'm going to try to spend the rest of my life forgetting I ever saw this. And so then I go back to the sheriff's department, and I saw one of her sisters on the sidewalk crying. So word was getting around that they had found a body. And I don't remember if I talked to anybody first, but literally at one point, her father, Larry, came up to me and asked me if they'd found his daughter. And I said, well, you need to talk to the sheriff, because I did tell him I had been out at the scene. And then he kind of, you know, grabbed me and asked me, did they find my daughter? And I'm like, yeah, they did.
Oh, gosh. And that had to be the worst moment of his life.
Yeah,
just
absolutely
that.
was.
But at the same time, you knew, and he wanted to know right then, there's no healthy way to find that information out. You're not going to find that out. You know.
Yeah, there's no. It doesn't matter who delivers or how they do it.
Yeah, it's just. And so we're back in September of 2004 when you're talking about this. So take us through what happens next.
Okay, so they started interviewing suspects in the case. Mm-hmm. Now, they only ever publicly named one suspect, and that was McCullough, the friend.
Okay.
And they cleared him, and we don't know how or why. You know, obviously he must have had an alibi that checked out at the time. So he was initially cleared in the case, and I actually interviewed him sometime after this. I actually got his phone number, called him, and interviewed him, and did a story with him. And so for years, you know, I would periodically write about this case, and there would be, you know, every once in a while, you know, we would have, you know, some information would be developed in the case. And so finally, but year after year after year after year, it just wasn't getting solved, you know. I found out that, you know, the likely murder weapon was a piano leg.
Piano leg.
And I also found out that she was struck one time in the head. It was a single blow that killed her. And so I you know, I'm an author, so, you know, I write true crime. And so in my first book, Witches in West Memphis, I included a chapter about her, even though the book was about the West Memphis 3 case, something I'd covered extensively through the years. And so what happened was I was at a book signing one day, and this guy shows up, and he, you know, he wants to buy a book, or he wanted me to pitch the book to him. And of course, I told him all about West Memphis 3, and then I eventually went to tell him about Rebekah's story.
Yes.
And so I tell him the story, and you know, I asked him if he wants to buy a book. He says, no, I want 10 of them. And there was a photographer there taking pictures. Well, I take the stack of books, and I put them up in front of him, and I said, who do I need to make the first one out to? And the photographer, she's just sitting there snapping shots for a magazine. And I flipped the cover over, and he reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out a little ribbon, and he said on the book, and it was a ribbon, it was a picture of her. And immediately when I saw the ribbon, I knew who he was. I didn't recognize him at first. It had been so many years.
It's been a while.
This was in 2016. So, of course, we started crying, we hugged, and then we kind of reconnected. You know, he's doing a lot of work on, you know, this case and whatnot. So, anyway, and we've been, you know, trying to develop leads, trying to, you know, get this case out in the forefront of the public. Well, you know, and I've wrote a lot of stories about it. Well, this year, a reporter named Catherine Townsend decided she wanted to do a podcast series on this case. So she started her Hell and Gone podcast series, and her and Dr. Gould went on the Dr. Oz show and promoted this case several weeks ago. And so kind of the reason I'm out talking about it now is that there seems to be some like real good public like sentiment. It's you know, there's a lot of people out here talking about this case again. It's getting some national attention. And this is the thing, it's kind of like anything else in life. When you splash more light onto something,
right,
you know, that's when information gets revealed. And so you know, my intention is to just to try to get this case as much public fanfare as we can so that we can get it solved. Because I don't ever want to have to write about this case again.
I can't blame you on that. And as you mentioned, with the public attention, you have the opportunity for people that have heard the small details, maybe irrelevant to them, that can be relevant in a larger picture.
Yes.
So we're always hopeful when we do one of these live streams, especially now, to let everybody know, if you happen to be listening and think you know something, to contact George. Probably one of the most reliable people you could get in touch with to work on this case. Obviously, you would be that person.
Yes.
And so George's information, you can find his profile under author George Jared, and we'll make sure that that's linked up in the comments after we finish our live broadcast. Glad to have so many people in with us tonight, just a few minutes after 7 p.m. as we're broadcasting live on NEA Report. And, of course, we'll have this on demand after the fact. Stan Morris here, George Jared also. We're talking about the unsolved mystery of the murder involving Rebekah Gould. It's a case that's gotten a lot of attention lately. 22-year-old college student that was murdered 14 years ago, and it was discussed recently on Dr. Oz. Before we get back, I want to remind everybody that we are so grateful for our sponsors helping us to bring this to you. New Wave Wireless, home of the $49 iPhone screen repair, and Family Medical Clinic of Walnut Ridge and Bono. Both great businesses sponsoring this tonight. So as we continue taking a look at what has happened and what we don't know, but we're trying to find answers. The piano leg. That seemed to be a very important detail. First of all, why is that believed to be the murder weapon? Was there wounds matching it, or were there matching bruises with the shape?
Well, here's the thing. The reason I believe that it was a piano leg is because she was killed a singular blow to the head. It would have to have been an object similar to like a baseball bat or just some type of a wooden or, obviously steel object. So that was one part of it. There was another part of it, though. Inside that house there was a piano, and it was missing a leg. And it just happened to be the leg that was missing was a leg that was loose.
Oh.
So the killer walked into the house, and this is what I think happened to her. I think that she went back to his house. There was a lot of blood found in the bed, on the bed. The mattress had been flipped. What I think happened is she was laying in the bed and her killer came in, and she had no defensive wounds. So I think that probably her killer came in and struck her in the head with a single blow, a single fatal blow, and that is what caused her to die. There was blood found on the house. The sheets were in the washing machine, and so that's how the piano leg plays into it. And I know that and I've reported on this in the past. That they've looked for the piano leg like near the White River. They were out there searching, several months after the murder for that piano leg out by the White River.
Did they ever find it?
Not that I know of. Again, the case file in this case has been closed. A couple years ago when this case kind of started getting hot again, I talked to Dennis Simons, who is the lead investigator, and Mark Hollingsworth. He's the lead. He's the head of the detectives division with the Arkansas State Police. And they were talking to me then. I tried to get a hold of Mark here recently. I came into some information from two anonymous sources that they had been doing some interviews in the case, and they had ramped up somewhat, and they had actually assigned another investigator to work with Dennis in the case. And so I tried to get a hold of him. He hasn't returned my calls. I don't know why. I've always had a pretty good relationship with them. So we'll see what happens. I don't know if it's because of all the publicity that's been coming out with Dr. Oz and this Helen Gone podcast. I don't know if it's all that. But anyway, it doesn't matter to me. If they just get it solved, that's all that matters.
Right, of course. Just find out what happened and find answers for a family that's grieving. I think a lot of people don't probably realize, and I don't even think I realized this until the last couple of months with some personal stuff that's gone on, how hard it is for the victim's family. Probably the most painful experiences are the ones they endure.
Absolutely. Rebekah died from a single blow to the head. She probably was asleep when it happened. No defensive wounds. So, the pain that's felt now for 14 years is her family's pain. It's not hers.
Yeah.
And, dealing with her family has, sometimes it can be a challenge dealing with family members like that. I've had to do it a lot, covering the murder cases I've covered through the years. This one's always kind of been personal to me because it was the first one, saw the body, dealt with her family in an intimate way that I probably haven't dealt with any other family, to be honest.
And close to them, them, and now that they become part of your life in that regard,
yes.
It does make it more personal. It really does. McCullough, have you talked to him in a while?
I have tried to get a hold of him. I was able to get a hold of a relative of his, and she told me that he would be happy to talk to me, and I thought, okay, but he decided he doesn't want to talk to me or any other media people. I know he still talks to the police when they inquire with him, but it's just, this thing is a mystery. Is it possible that he just doesn't want to talk because he's tired of being attached to this? That's possible, and I would totally understand that to a certain degree. But there is a lot of suspicion around him. He's the only person who the police said was a suspect. They have not said anybody else. I know for a fact that they do have other people that they think may have done this crime. They just won't say it publicly. They've said it to me privately and off the record. But after 14 years, it's time for there needs to be some freshness from the investigative standpoint in this case. I think that it's entirely a solvable case. There's not a lot of complicated moving parts here. She was struck in the head, and then her body was dumped. There's not some cases I cover. There's multiple people murdered. There's multiple people who have motives and all this other stuff. So anyway, and I hear all that. I've heard all these conspiracy theories that somebody killed her over $40 for like a minor drug thing, for like some marijuana or something like that, which is to me is implausible because of the simple fact that all of her stuff was found in the house. Her car was found at the house. And one thing I should note at this time, Casey, when he left work that day, didn't go home. He went to a friend's house and stayed the night. So he didn't go back and to see all that we know of. So that's what he said. So there's just a lot of questions, and we need to find some answers.
It's hard to find answers when a case like this has lingered for so long. What do you think the greatest possibility would be for something to come up? Is it going to be from a tip, or is it going to be from something else?
It's going to be somebody out there who knows something. That is where this case is going to get solved, because somebody or somebodies are going to come forward with information that links the murderer to the crime.
There's a friend somewhere that's heard somebody bragging or somebody boasting or somebody talking about getting away with it, isn't there?
Or somebody who this person may have confessed to, said, this is really troubling me. I did this heinous thing.
Wow, it's so terrible to think about. What else is there? Is there any other? Because I know we talk about this pretty, every several months at least. We try to visit and discuss it, but it's not gotten as much attention before recently as it is right now. What are we missing today? What other areas would we have not covered today? There's a great story, by the way, at neareport.com that you read. Right. If folks haven't seen that, must read.
Yeah, I was going to say you can read about it. I mean, just read that story. It's got pretty much a kind of an outline of the case and all that. I also included the story in both the books that I wrote about it, which has a little more detail, fleshes out some of that stuff a little bit more. Really, the main thing that needs to be emphasized is that people need to come forward who know about this case. If you know something, come forward.
That's probably the biggest and single most important advice that you could give for somebody out there that knows something. We need to hear from them, and it's Rebekah's family that wants to hear from them the most. Can we get you to hold a close-up of that just once so that I can zoom in on that for our live audience? Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. If you like what you're watching, likes and shares help us get the word out to many more people. I'm zooming in on that just right now. I want everybody to see this so that we'll take the super down so that you guys can get a closer look at that too. Rebekah Gould, her photos all over NEA Report, neareport.com. You've probably seen them lately on whether it's Dr. Oz or you've heard about it from the Dead and Gone,
Hell and Gone,
podcast series. It's just a tragic case, and it's a local case, one that happened in NEA. A young girl with her life ahead of her, just 22. And she was killed with blunt force trauma to the head, a piano leg, is what they believe. In
fact, you can even see the notes I took right back here.
The notes, possibly, it may be a little hard to visualize. You can see some of those right there. Original reporting notes that George took on the story. Obviously, just something that you have been involved with for very, very long.
Yes.
And it's easy to see how that can be, an emotional experience for you.
Yes.
Just kind of at the tail end of this, since we're wrapping our live broadcast up, the stuff that's happened. It's not part of this live stream, but I'm just going to throw it in anyway. Some of the stuff that's happened involving my family really opened my eyes to what the victims go through. I mean, I can't even say that I could have visualized it beforehand, and I thought that I did. I thought at the time I did a good job thinking about what it must be like to be a victim.
Right.
And I still hadn't even scratched the surface.
Right.
The suffering that Dr. Gould must be going through and have gone through is like a lifetime of torture.
Right.
It's hard to imagine hell being much worse than that,
right.
isn't it?
Right.
And so, well, we hope that somebody out there, do we have numbers on here that we might be able to read out just for people that might read after the fact?
I don't know. These are 14-year-old numbers.
14-year-old numbers.
Yeah. So
well, how about this? How about we do this? If you want to get in touch with the department that would be most probably...
The Arkansas State Police.
Would be the Arkansas State Police. But I highly suggest if you have information, give it to George, and then let him take it to the police, because there's a better chance that it'll be taken seriously that way, just to be honest.
Right. In fact, that happened in 2016. Dr. Gould got a letter in the mail, and I called the state police and talked to them about it, because the letter had some details from an alleged witness who said they overheard a conversation with people talking about the murder. So
wow. It's incredible. It's an incredible case. I wish that we could find some closure for the family. I hope that maybe some folks that have watched this, or maybe something we've done here, I hope that that'll help a little bit. Nothing else, that keeps it on people's minds so that people are thinking about it, maybe talking about it too. As we begin November here, our live streams, we hope to resume occasionally as we can. We'll do more with you, George. Of course, you're always welcome to come in and
thank you.
Write for us, do a live stream, or do whatever you'd like. We love sharing the platform with you. So,
excellent.
Great. Thank you, George. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us tonight on NEA Report. It's been a serious broadcast, as we are here to try to hopefully bring a little bit of information and closure in for the family of Rebekah Gould. Now, if you would like, you can like and share this. That'll actually help spread the word. You can also check out the accompanying story at neareport.com. This broadcast brought to you by New Wave Wireless, home of the $49 iPhone screen repair, and Family Medical Clinic of Walnut Ridge and Bono, now accepting new patients. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, thanks to my buddy George for being with us. And now you're up to date from NEA Report. We hope you have a great night.